Trigger warning. Viewing the following content may cause intellectual strain and swelling of logical capacity. If you suffer from perpetual rectal discomfort, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to today's conversation. My name is Anthony. I'm joined today by my son Jeremiah. Today we're going to be talking about feminism and its impact on our society. Particularly, we're going to be looking at feminism and how it's affected Generation Z. I think personally, as a member of Generation X, I can see historically how feminism changed society during the days that I was growing up in my formative years, and I'm looking now out at the world, in the years that my son is growing up, and I'm trying to understand a little bit better how it is that feminism is impacting his generation. So today we're going to have that conversation, but I believe it's important in any conversation that if we're going to truly understand each other, that the words that we use have to be understood to mean the same thing. So in that sense, what I'm going to be doing here is I asked my son to do a little bit of research. He's not very strongly rooted in feminist history. It's not something that's been a big part of his life, as he's only 15. But I asked him to do a little bit of research about it and to get at least a rudimentary understanding and a basic working knowledge of what it is, so that when we have this conversation, that he could understand where I was coming from and what I was referring to. I want to share what he's learned with you, so that you as the audience can also understand specifically what we are referring to when we say feminism during this conversation. So at this time, I'd like to ask my son to go ahead and share some of his research.
Okay, so the research that I've conducted is feminism, the history of feminism, and what it is. I'm using Britannica for our source. It's not a bias, so nobody can really say if it's completely left leaning, completely right leaning, and it's been used for many, many years to do research. So we're going to start off for what is feminism. It says, at its core, feminism is the belief in full social, economic, and political equality for women. Feminism largely arose in response to Western traditions that restricted the rights of women, but feminist thought has global manifestations and variations. So that is feminism. That's what they say feminism is and how it kind of started out as. What we have here is what is intersectional feminism. I've never heard of this, so it's going to be something new for me as well. Intersectionality is a term coined by Professor Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989 to describe how different social categories interact, sometimes resulting in compounding effects and tensions. Her paper on the subject argued that discrimination specifically against black women is different from general anti-women discrimination or anti-black racism. Instead, it involves the unique compound experience of both sexism and racism. Initially used in the context of discrimination law, the concept saw a resurgence in the 21st century among left-wing activists who broadened intersectionality to include categories such as a class and a sexual orientation. So that is what intersectional feminism is. We're going to be talking about here what second wave feminism is. For those of you that don't know, I'm just going to let you know that I didn't know this at least, there is multiple waves of feminism. So I guess there's multiple different ways of looking at it. Some people use second wave, some people use third wave, but we'll get into that a little bit later. This is second wave. This talks about the history. It says, the women's movement of the 1960s and the 70s, the so-called second wave of feminism, represented a seemingly abrupt break with the tranquil suburban life pictured in American popular culture. Yet the roots of the new rebellion were buried in the frustrations of college-educated mothers whose discontent impelled their daughters in a new education. If first-wave feminists were inspired by the abolition movement, their great-granddaughters were swept into feminism by the civil rights movement, the attendant discussion of principles such as equality and justice, and the revolutionary ferment caused by protest against the Vietnam War. So that describes what second wave feminism is and kind of a bit of the history on how it started. This is a third wave. The third wave of feminism emerged in the mid-1990s. It was led by so-called Generation Xers, who, born in the 1960s and 70s in the developed world, came of age in a media-saturated and culturally and economically diverse milieu. Although they benefited significantly from the legal rights and protections they had been obtained by first and second wave feminists, they also critiqued the positions and what they felt was unfinished work of the second wave feminism, or of second wave feminism. This is fourth wave. This is what is going on currently, I believe. Although debated by some, many claim that a fourth wave of feminism began about 2012 with a focus on sexual harassment, body shaming, and rape culture. Among other issues, a key component was the use of social media to highlight and address these concerns. We can get more into this topic and more into this wave on feminism, but for the purpose of this conversation, that's what I'm going to read because this is specifically what we are talking about. If you guys would like to read this, we post all the articles and all the research we do in the description, so you can go check it out for yourself.
All right. I think that, Britannica, which back in my day was known as Encyclopedia Britannica and actually came on paper in books that you had to go buy and carry. That's a source of information that has been used and trusted for a long time. That's not to say that it's not possible to have a political bias
Yes.
creep in over time. My personal belief that any organization that doesn't practice an active culture will inevitably deteriorate. It's just that simple. You have to actively work towards maintaining any standard that is above normal, because it is human nature to think too normal. Again, for the purposes of our conversation, these were just loose definitions, or descriptions rather of feminism and what they kind of represented in the movement and the rough time frames that they existed. But the one thing that struck me in the way that you brought them up is that you can see that each wave of feminism was tied to another connection of rights. The original wave of feminism was tied to the abolitionist movement, which is, to try to abolish slavery. Then the second wave came around as a result of, the civil rights movement and, anti-war protesting because of Vietnam. Then third and fourth wave are just later variations. The third wave was basically just complaining that the second wave didn't do enough, and the fourth wave just went all Me Too. So that's pretty much the layman's understanding of what those terms are. But I think in making sure that we understand how those different ideas and those movements led from their basic core foundational groundwork to the actual manifestation in society and what became of society as a result of the introduction of those ideas. I think there's a lot of ways to look at it. I think if you're looking at it strictly from a woman's point of view and from an economic point of view, I think women can certainly make the case that feminism has been fantastic for them. I would also say that, historically, I think that it's also unnecessary. Women were in the workforce for a long time before the civil rights movement. Rosie the Riveter is a perfect example.
Rosie the Riveter is an allegorical cultural icon in the United States who represents the women who worked in factories and shipyards during World War II, many of whom produced munitions and war supplies. These women sometimes took entirely new jobs, replacing the male workers who joined the military. She is widely recognized in the "We Can Do It" poster as a symbol of American feminism and women's economic advantage. Similar images of women war workers appeared in other countries such as Britain and Australia. The idea of Rosie the Riveter originated in a song written in 1942 by Red Evans and John Jacob Loeb. Images of women workers were widespread in the media in formats such as government posters, and commercial advertising was heavily used by the government to encourage women to volunteer for wartime service in factories. Rosie the Riveter became the subject and title of a Hollywood film in 1944.
Rosie the Riveter is a perfect example, where a lot of the men went to war in World War II, and it was women that made up the majority of the people that were working, because most of the men were gone. And the funny thing is that when the men came back from war, the women who wanted to continue working continued working. But the overwhelming majority of the women said, no, I want to go home. And that's okay. And that's what feminism is supposed to be, right? Equal rights, where you as an individual have the freedom to choose the path that you want to choose. That's the idea. That's the concept.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I think like all other concepts, and right now I'm going to share an article that I think did a fantastic job of really articulating exactly what it was that I wanted to say. It's in a magazine called Evie. I will readily acknowledge that Evie is not what one would consider a left-wing publication. Depending on which fact-checking website you go to, Evie is either a leaning right publication or an extreme right publication. So I guess it depends on who owns the fact-checkers.
Yeah.
But the one thing that stood out to me, and the one thing that I've never understood why nobody got this or why nobody makes a big deal about this, the Green New, not the Green New Deal, the New Deal, basically created the social state. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. That was government spending on a level that prior to that was never even imagined. Right? For government to fund that properly, they needed to increase the tax base. Now, coincidentally, and this is the part that I find truly amusing, coincidentally, at the same time, guess what was happening? The push to give women equal rights. And equal rights in the sense that women should be able to go to work and pay taxes. Now, this article here specifically highlights something that I've always suspected, but I've never really found a way to totally articulate. And I'll just read it here real quickly. It says, the Marxist roots of feminism. Feminist and socialist ideologies share many similarities. Socialism, with its original focus on worker rights, concentrated on the conflict between oppressor and oppressed as it pertained to the upper and lower economic classes in society. Feminism uses the same dichotomy, but instead of oppressor and oppressed being seen from the economic standpoint, it's seen from the perspective of gender. Both Marxism and feminism are ideological perspectives pertaining to power in society, who has it, and its rightful distribution. The haves and have-nots became the masculine and the feminine. Both ideologies seek the same end via leveling natural differences of competence, skill, ambition, ability, and economic or genetic inheritance in the pursuit of equality. They claim that meritocracy is flawed, that the natural order was rigged, and that by lifting the weak up and keeping the strong down, everyone would be freer. Of course, the opposite is true. Now, this is a way of basically saying that, as with most progressive ideas, they all stem from, and this goes back to the reference of intersectional feminism, they all stem from this idea that everything in life can be viewed from the lens of being a victim or being the victor, being the oppressor or being the oppressed.
Yeah.
That's why they currently have the oppression Olympics, where the more oppression points you have, the better your chances of winning the game. In other words, if you're handicapped, that gets you a certain point. If you're of certain race, that gives you more points.
Mm-hmm.
If you're part of the alphabet soup, that gives you extra points, right? Depending on whatever your check boxes are on the chart of oppression, the
Yeah.
more check boxes you have, the more oppressed you are, and the more you benefit from the programs that are being pushed in society to make everything fair and even.
Yeah, it's pretty much who can play the best victim, who's been hurt the most by the system.
And that's not to say that there aren't genuine people who have been hurt,
Yeah.
right? Because obviously, again, I'll reiterate something I've said on a couple of episodes. Every conversation has to be largely rooted in generalities.
Mm-hmm.
Unless we are speaking about specific people by name, you're gonna be having conversations based on generalities, and every generality is going to have its exceptions.
Mhm.
That is acknowledged, that's understood. Exceptions, however, do not make the rule. The rule is the rule, and the exceptions are what they are. They are the rare cases. They are the minority of cases. They are by far not a majority or anywhere near a majority of the situations in that particular um, conversation or whatever the circumstances are that we're talking about. And in this case, this idea of oppressor and oppressed, a great example would be what happened with the Supreme Court and throwing out the affirmative action.
Mm-hmm.
Asian people were being actively oppressed, being required to have about 235 more points on the SAT
Yeah.
to be admitted to Harvard in order to allow less qualified black people admission.
Which is ridiculous. And if you guys do want to hear more about that, we have that in a other video. You can go check that out. But yeah, it was very just appalling to see how they were, they have black people play the victim when there are, people who are actually being treated unequally, such as Asians, and it was very messed up. That's the double standard was ridiculous.
Yeah, and it goes further than that, right? Again, going back to Marxism, the article does make it a point to kind of note it's certainly not a conspiracy to believe in the connection between women's empowerment narratives and Marxist ideology. Lenin, okay, he was the Russian guy I told you about,
Yeah.
was open about his mission to destroy the nuclear family by pushing women into the workforce. You see, to a communist, a woman who was spending her time taking care of her husband and children was a waste of a good worker who could be put to use for Mother Russia. In fact, the equal pay for equal work slogan of today's feminists was officially legislated for the first time by Lenin's Bolshevik government. By pushing women out of the home, Marxists were able to achieve two goals at once. They destroyed the biologically strong glue of the nuclear family while doubling their workforce. And then they further go on in the article to highlight the connection between feminism and taxes. And the one thing that really stood out to me in this portion was nothing is supported by the state that doesn't directly benefit the state. The federal government's main objective is to continually establish and expand its power and dominion over the public. Feminism furthers this aim by incentivizing and persuading women to leave the home to work. Instead of raising their children and playing an active role in their education, religious upbringing, these roles are now outsourced, paid for, and taxed by a mother's income. I think that, it may be slightly, what's the right word? It could be slightly offensive for some people to hear that because in this society and the world we live in, there are some people who have to work.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a choice, right? But the overwhelming majority of women that work do so because they want to. That you don't have to work in every single situation. There's choices that can be made in life that make the necessity of working less when you're a woman. It's much more culturally acceptable for a woman to be cared for by a man than it is for a man to be cared for by a woman.
Yeah, but nowadays women, women go as like they don't need a man to do that, which is, kind of ridiculous because for years it's been, the cultural norm that is fine for a woman to be a housewife and take care of the children.
Yeah, that's true, and it also goes to the point where, you see a lot of men staying at home, and then the women are going out working. But the sad, unfortunate reality is the majority of relationships in this day and age are vastly dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And part of it is because, and this is my opinion, part of it is because we've completely lost touch with and abandoned gender roles. And that's not to say that you are not free to express your gender in whichever way you want, right? There are masculine women and there are feminine men. That's irrelevant because there are some people who are attracted to masculine women and some people who are attracted to feminine men. That is not the point. That is not what I am discussing. What I'm discussing is that we are made to be complementary,
Hmm.
right? And we're made to work together. The statistics have clearly proven that the worst possible scenario for a child statistically is to grow up with a single mother.
Yeah.
The children do better with a single father. The children do better in a home where there's two parents. The children do better basically in every scenario other than with a single mother.
We know that more than half of all black children live in single parent households. Half. A number that's doubled since we were children. You know the statistics that children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit crime. They're 9 times more likely to drop out of school, 20 times more likely to end up in prison. They're more likely to have behavioral problems or run away from home or become teen parents because the father wasn't in the home. The foundations of our community and our country are weaker because of this.
Children that are raised by single mothers lead the statistics for everything bad. They are the top of the list, and by a large margin. I mean, it's fairly obvious that that is not a preferable way to raise a child. Yet in 2023, like you said, you have a lot of these women going around saying, "I don't need a man. I can do it all on my own." Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And yeah, technically, sure.
Yeah. And
But you're
we're
being selfish, and you're
yeah.
thinking about yourself, and you're not thinking about your child.
And nobody's saying that women can't raise, their own. I mean, we're not saying it can ever happen, that it's impossible for, a mother to raise a son or a daughter and have that son or daughter turn out to be a good citizen, but it's rare, and anybody with common sense can understand why. You need a mother, you need a father. They both have their attributes to help you grow. A father kind of puts down discipline in the household while the mother is more emotionally tendering and nurturing to the child. And if you don't have that, then it's unstable. There's no balance.
Yeah. And in recognition of that, the closing thoughts of this article, I think, knock it out of the park, right? The author, G.K. Chesterton, once said, feminism is a muddled idea that women are free when they serve their employers, but slaves when they help their husbands.
Yeah.
That's like, that says it all, man. That really says it all. And like you've said on a couple of occasions in this conversation, this idea that women don't need men, that they can do it on their own. You can't put ideas out there into the consciousness of society and not have some kind of an effect.
Yeah.
So, I had asked you previously if you could do a little bit of research and see what you can come up with as the most prominent in your generation, what you think as the most prominent effect that's occurred as a result of feminism.
Hmm.
So, what did you find?
Okay, so one thing I found, and it's a little trending right now, is I would go as far to say high school boys in general, but they are saying 12th grade boys becoming more conservative as girls trend overwhelmingly liberal. Survey finds at the bottom, it says, "We are creating this idea that if you're male, you're bad," says psychotherapist. That's according to Fox News. Now, I also have a statistic from the Hill, and before I go on to show this and kind of talk about it, I would like to say that what I believe is that we've kind of put this bad image upon young men that it's not good to be masculine. You gotta suppress your masculinity. You don't have to be a man. You have to be more in touch with your feminine self and all that. And on top of that, I feel like Democrats, their priority, the Democratic Party's priority, have been more on kind of making people feel better and gender type stuff, I guess. And men, especially young men, don't particularly care about that kind of thing, as well as young men don't really care about politics in general. But the small amount that does are seeming to lean much more conservative. It's, in my opinion, I believe that they are so fed up of the agenda and the ideology that's been pushed towards them about suppressing their masculinity, and that they should treat girls like queens, and that girls don't need them or something. They're so tired of it that some of these young men don't really know much about conservatism, but they choose to lean right because they rather be as far as away as from the left as possible. It says in this article, in annual surveys over the last 3 years, roughly 1/4 of high school seniors self-identified as conservative or very conservative. On the Monitoring the Future survey, a scholarly endeavor that dates to the 1970s, only 13% of boys identified as liberal or very liberal in those years. And in the statistic, we can see, going back to 1975, we had 25% of 12th grade boys specifically identify as liberal, and 17% identify as conservative. But now we are here in 2022, and 23% of them are identifying as conservative, and it's been a major shift in the past 10 to 20 years or so. We have 23% identifying as conservative, while 13% identify as liberal. Now, on the other hand, we have girls who are now identifying much more liberal than ever. Now, from this statistic, we can clearly see that for the most part, girls have identified as liberal since the 1970s. But now we have 30% identifying as liberal, and we have these two different ends. They're on the complete opposite, and that's what we're seeing. I think that guys are really fed up of this, and girls keep buying into this, that this ideology that they don't need a man and that they don't need men to take care of them and all that, and they're kind of splitting these two apart, which I know you said to me earlier that it's probably affecting their relationships and it's having negative effects on that, and I completely agree.
Leave that graph up. Pull that graph back up. There's two things I want to point out about this. First of all, the question is kind of misleading, right?
Yeah.
Because very few people identify as liberal, period.
Yeah.
Today, you're much more likely to have people on the left identify as progressive.
Yes.
Which would translate into very far left liberal.
Yeah.
Liberalism is classical liberalism is the foundation of the United States. It's the idea that individual responsibility and individual freedom are important and should be defended. There's an example. I can't recall the year off of the top of my head, but there were some Nazis that were doing a protest, right? Nazis, actual, not the people that progressive weenies call Nazis today.
Yeah.
I'm talking about actual Nazis.
Okay.
All right, and they wanted to do a protest, and the ACLU, which used to be an organization that stood for civil liberties, used to, not anymore, but it used to be, right? They actually defended the organizers of that march.
Nazis.
They defended the Nazis.
ACLU history taking a stand for free speech in Skokie. Document date September 1, 2010. In 1978, the ACLU took a controversial stand for free speech by defending a neo-Nazi group that wanted to march through the Chicago suburb of Skokie, where many Holocaust survivors lived. The notoriety of the case caused some ACLU members to resign, but to many others the case has come to represent the ACLU's unwavering commitment to principle. In fact, many of the laws the ACLU cited to defend the group's right to free speech and assembly were the same laws it had invoked during the civil rights era, When southern cities tried to shut down civil rights marches with similar claims about the violence and disruption the protests would cause. Although the ACLU prevailed in its free speech arguments, the neo-Nazi group never marched through Skokie, instead agreeing to stage a rally at Federal Plaza in downtown Chicago.
There's other systemic reasons why women would trend liberal where men would not. And I'll ask you a question. When you're 18 years old,
Yeah.
if you're not in college,
Yeah.
what do I expect you to do?
Have a steady paying job, or at least be able to support myself, to put it simple.
And you think you're going to stay here for free?
Well, that's what I meant by support myself. Either pay rent or
Okay.
here or move out.
Well, here's the difference, right? For the most part, women get a free ride for practically their whole lives, right? They can stay at home with their parents as long as they want, because most parents won't put out their little girl, their precious little girl. They won't put them out, right? So a lot of women will stay home until they find a man that they can shack up with.
Yeah.
Not all, of course, but a lot.
Yeah.
Then they'll shack up with that guy.
Which
Now,
I thought it would be a bit more of the opposite, because I thought, girls tend to mature faster, so they'd probably leave the house sooner than guys. Or
no,
at the
it's
same
it's
time.
because they're mature that they have the sense to stay home. Why would you want to go spend money you don't have to,
Get away.
right? But they can get away with it, so there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But more often than not, when you're talking outside of educated circles, what happens is, young girl enters her garden tool phase, and then ends up getting knocked up. Okay, so now she has a baby. Because she was such a scholar and so educated, she picked a complete douchebag to be the father, and now the father is no longer around. He disappeared. Whatever, he's in prison, or he just dumped her as soon as he found out that she wouldn't have an abortion. Whatever the case, right? Long story short is, here you have, uneducated, useless mother with baby.
With the baby.
Now, parents generally in this situation, they'll be supportive to a certain extent, but at the same time, chances are that the parents are the reason why the child developed in that way and ended up making those choices.
Yeah.
So more often than not, they're probably not going to be as supportive as you'd like them to be. So now, daughter has no choice but to turn to Big Daddy Warbucks, Uncle Government, and say, hey, I need help, right? So now taxpayer is now funding irresponsible choices by garden tool and baby. So, these things happen. So there's a structural incentive for women to favor government, and government definitely has a clear liberal bias.
Yeah.
So, you look further down the line, right? You look at family court. Family court is clearly biased to the woman, even though there's so much evidence that demonstrates that children have better outcomes when the family stays together.
Yeah.
Family court doesn't even try to get that to be a possibility. Like,
Yeah.
they don't even make it an effort, right? Divorce court, same thing. No fault divorce is basically just, I just don't feel like being married to you anymore, so we're over. Marriage itself has no value in 2023.
Yeah. Absolutely.
When you can dissolve a marriage for no reason, then basically what you have is nothing. You don't even have a promise. You just have a contract of convenience, and when it's no longer convenient, poof, contract goes away.
Yeah, which is really sad to just think about.
Yeah, but think about this. The laws are written in such a way that women completely have an advantage over men, where when women, which file 80% of divorces in the United States, walk away from a marriage, now they'll all claim, oh, he was terrible, he was this, he was that, right? Which is, obviously in some cases true,
Mm-hmm.
but, any level of skeptic kind of analysis would tell you that not every woman is married to a piece of crap, murderer.
Yeah.
Right? So, there are women who are leaving perfectly good husbands just because they're bored, just because they want more excitement in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So now you have a husband who's invested, into his wife and all of that, and then that goes away, right? So the system itself gives women motivation to be loyal to the system,
Yeah.
right? Because the system is what allows women to do all of these things.
Yeah.
And they're not held to the same standard as men, right? Because if you're a man and you have a kid, guess what? You got to pay,
Yeah.
and they don't care. They'll lock your ass up. They'll throw away the key. Like, it's counterintuitive, right? Because if you owe money, they will put you in jail, which makes you owe more money.
Yeah.
But they'll still do that, right? It's insane the way the system is so biased against men.
Mm-hmm.
But there's other consequences too, right? And I think some of those consequences are behind the ideology behind feminism.
Yeah.
And I'm going to share something now. It's a basic concept. It's called hypergamy, right?
Okay.
And for a lot of people, this isn't exactly what you would call one-sided. This happens both male and female, but this is predominantly a female phenomenon, right? And hypergamy is according to Wikipedia, colloquially referred to as dating up or marrying up, is a term used in social science for the act or practice of a person dating or marrying a spouse of higher caste, social status, or sexual capital than themselves. Now that I've given you that definition, what do you think that means, right? I'll repeat it, and then you give me what you think it means.
All right.
A term used in social science for the act or practice of a person dating or marrying a spouse of higher caste,
Mm-hmm.
social status,
Yeah.
or sexual capital than themselves.
Okay, so what I think of is pretty much a woman who is just getting married or dating somebody for their status and their money. They don't really care about the man himself or his feelings towards her. They just care about what he can give them.
Okay, that's a pretty reasonable guess.
In other words, Jeff Bezos' ex-wife.
Yeah, I would say that that accusation could certainly be leveled.
Yeah. Or man lost half his money.
But there's multiple levels to hypergamy, right?
Yeah.
There's financial hypergamy, which is when a person strictly looks for somebody who is of higher financial status.
Yeah.
Then there's sexual marketplace hypergamy, when somebody seeks out somebody who is clearly of a higher level of sexual attractiveness. Going back to like a traditional number scale, right? If you're a 5,
Yeah.
but you're chasing a 10,
Yeah.
that's the concept of hypergamy. But it only usually happens one way and not the other, and that's because men and women, and this is going to come as a shock to a lot of people, but men and women are actually different.
Who knew? Yeah.
We're not the same.
Crazy.
Women will not, for the most part, date down, ever.
Yeah.
Men will. Men have no problem casually dating somebody who they deem to be below them physically or attractiveness, financially, whatever.
Yeah.
One night stands, friend with benefits, whatever the case may be. Men have no problem with that. Women, on the other hand, they flatly refuse to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go ahead and share a video that I found here. The creator is a channel called Wheat Waffles. I never heard of them. But when I saw this video, I want to make sure I give them credit. They'll also be linked down in the description below.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a little bit of commentary on this too, to kind of highlight some things. But when I saw this, it really struck me, because it really did kind of put it into a nice clear, concise way. The name of the video is "The 3 Tiers of Men."
Mm-hmm.
Which are you? And then, like I said, the creator is a a channel named Wheat Waffles. So I'm gonna go ahead and play this now.
Anyway, I'm going to explain the main content of the video now, which is breaking down exactly how I believe each distinct group interacts with all of the others within the dating market. And I do want to warn you, there will be a lot of generalizations being made here. So before you think of any criticisms, at least see through these next 2 minutes so I can completely get my points across. Anyway, my first analysis is 1. The guys at the top of the pyramid, the so-called Chads, they have complete control over the whole of the top tier and mid-tier women. A lot of these guys aren't settling down as they have an abundance of both one-night stand options and friends with benefits coming from these two tiers.
All right, so for people who might just be listening to this and not watching the video,
Yeah.
what's on screen right now is there's 3 rows of pictures of men on the left and 3 rows of pictures of women on the right. The top of the screen is what the channel, the content creator labeled as sub 5, or basically below average.
Mm-hmm.
And the pictures are more or less what you would think of when you think of someone who appears physically below average in attractiveness.
Yeah.
The middle row, both men and women, are what he calls normies. These would be your 5s. These would be your 5 to 6s. These are just average people, you know, nothing special, but nothing particularly negative. You know, they just don't stand out, but they're not ugly, right? And again, there's both men and women.
Yeah.
And then the bottom row, this is what he calls, you know, on the left, he calls them the Chads.
Yeah.
And then on the right, you know, I'm not sure if he gives them a specific name, but they're basically, these are the top 10%. These are the people who have really attractive faces.
Yeah.
Right. And these are all face pics, right? So obviously that's all you're going to see. But they're people with attractive faces that clearly distinguish them from everybody else.
Yeah, so you got like Chris Hemsworth for the guys in the chat.
Yeah, like his level of picture, you know, like that type of thing. So that's kind of the idea that he's going with. And what he just said is that, you know, the top level guys basically have the top level girls and the mid level girls locked down.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of what he said so far. And basically you could understand, right?
Yeah.
Again, because of hypergamy, right? The top level women, they're going for the top level guys.
Oh yeah.
But also the middle women, right? Because women will always seek to date up.
Yeah.
Right? So they are also going for the top level guys.
Yeah.
And because men and women are different, the top level guys, if they're having a dry week, or if they're, you know, they're having a little bit of issues trying to land one of the top women, they'll just go ahead and, you know, spend time with one of the mid-level women just to fill in the gaps. You know, let's see, what's the easiest way I could say this without being demonetized?
What, side chick?
No. If it's 2:45 in the morning and the bar closes at 3, and the only thing left in the bar is the average, kind of below average looking girl.
Yeah.
For most guys, it's better to take her somewhere and entertain her.
Yeah, you'd be like, hey, what the hell?
Than to go home and entertain himself.
Yeah, right.
Okay? On the other hand, he will be very unlikely to ever admit that he did that to any of his friends.
Yeah.
But in his own mind, he well, you know, okay. So that's more or less what he's talked about so far. So let's see what else he has to say.
I also want to point out that most of these options are sourced from online dating apps. If you haven't realised by now, it is these top 10 to 15% guys who are hoarding all the matches on Tinder. 2. For the women in these 2 tiers, especially the mid-tier, in return for what they're giving out, they are demanding relationships and commitment from these top-tier guys. However, the majority of these men are choosing not to cooperate as they don't want to settle with anyone below their level. 3. A minor caveat to this, though, is a fair amount of the top tier guys are happy and okay with getting in a long-term relationship with the highest value women. 4.
All right, so that goes back to what I was saying about hypergamy, right?
Yeah.
Women always look to date up, right? So
Mhm.
the mid-tier women want to have relationships with the top-tier men.
Yeah.
They'd love that, right? Because that's like they couldn't hope to get any better than that. But top-tier men, on the other hand, they they're just not interested. They
Yeah.
have so many options available to them. They under no circumstance have to settle for a mid-tier woman when they have access to top-tier women.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And the difference is top-tier men will lower themselves for an intimate relationship,
Mhm.
but they won't lower themselves for an emotional relationship,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So they'll hook up, they'll smash, they'll say whatever they got to say
Mhm.
to maintain that casual, friends with benefits situation or the ONS situation. But as far as like going in public
Yeah.
and like, yeah, this is my girl, no,
No,
that
that's
ain't
not
gonna
happening.
happen for the top tier guys.
Yeah.
And of course, this has ripples and implications for everybody else. So let's see what else he has to say.
The women in the middle's unremitting desire to lock down a Chad has a knock-on effect for the mid-tier average normie guys. Because in order for a woman in the middle to maintain her availability, it means she has to temporarily friend zone any non-Chad guys that approach her. Which again, if you haven't realised by now, friend zoning is effectively the woman wanting to keep you in the background as an orbiter in case she starts running out of time and thinks she may miss out on her plans of wanting to start a family, in which case she can simply pluck you from orbit whenever she feels necessary.
He says, "Pluck you from orbit."
I mean, the way he says it is funny, but in 2023, a large percent of women have what's referred to as a roster,
Yeah.
right? But more importantly, they have one man for a particular function in their life. They have the guy that's their friend, the guy that they cry to, the guy that they complain about the other guys to, right?
Mhm.
Then they have the guy they use for money, right? So he's the one that pays for all the stuff. Then they have the guy that they don't actually like all that much, but who they love for sex. So they keep him around for that, but don't actually want to like date him, right? And every function that they need of a man, there's a guy for that. There's the guy that comes over and fixes their stuff when it breaks,
Yeah.
right? So think of, what used to be the role of one man
Yeah. Right.
back in the day, because, and let's face it, in 2023, one man usually doesn't have the capacity to be all of those things anymore
Yeah.
because they've had their masculinity beat out of them over the last 20 years.
Mhm.
So now they have, 5, 7, 8 guys in their circle, each to fill a specific role that used to be all filled by that one guy.
Yeah.
So when he says beta orbiters, that's just like that defines it to a T. Because, you know, when people say alphas and betas, a lot of people try to make it seem like it's, oh, you're like this super badass guy, and it's like, no,
Yeah.
no. My understanding, right? Me as a Gen Xer, an alpha male is a guy who is capable of handling whatever's thrown at him.
Mhm.
Now, it doesn't mean that, you're going to be able to build a space shuttle. It doesn't mean that, if your house is on fire, that you can single-handedly put it out. What it does mean is that as a man, you have a working and basic understanding of every system in your home,
Yeah.
right? Electrical, plumbing, the framing, everything, right? You as a man should be able to do at least entry-level maintenance on everything.
Mhm.
Everything. Doesn't matter what it is. Your cars, your house, whatever it is, you should be able to have the knowledge. And if you don't have the knowledge, have the intelligence to be able to learn the skills so that you can do that.
Yeah. Not
Right?
pay somebody.
But in today's day and age, having all of that knowledge and skill is considered old fashioned. Oh, you don't need to do that, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, in today's day and age, it's considered old-fashioned to know how to cook.
And then you wonder why, all these people your generation are going broke because a lot of you don't actually know how to do anything, so you have to pay people to do it all for you.
Yeah.
But let's see what else he has to say.
5. In the meantime, these normie tier men become desperate for the women who are rejecting them on their level, end up settling for the friend zone, for which they then become a source of emotional support, favours, and basically a shoulder to cry on. 6. One of the biggest, if not the biggest, market force, both normies and sub 5 guys ferociously simp over the top tier women. And in return, these women give a grand total of nothing back. Because, after all, that is the very definition of simping. A man mindlessly wasting his energy and resources on a woman for absolutely nothing in return that will benefit him. 7. A surprisingly large number of the normie tier guys, out of pure desperation, lower themselves to trying with the women at the very bottom for one-night stands and casual intimacy. And the only reason they do this is because they've ruthlessly tried everywhere else and got no results. 8. These low-tier women in response become resentful of average guys for not wanting to commit to them. 9. I find this one the most hilarious. Women of all levels give the same treatment to sub-5 men, which is emotional reactions of disgust, pity, and abhorrence if any of these guys interact with their lives in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, basically what they're saying is, and just to put this in terms that somebody in your generation can understand, it doesn't necessarily matter what you say to a woman when you approach her for the first time. Her reaction to you is going to be based almost entirely on how you look.
Yeah.
Right? You could be the smoothest talker and like have the slickest lines, but if you look like a troll, you're done. You're not going to get nowhere, right? And at the same time, right, if you are like Chris Hemsworth look, you know, like that Adonis.
Oh, man, you could be
Greek
as dumb
guy,
as a rock.
right? You can walk up to a chick and literally tell her, you know, like, are you DTF? And
Yeah,
that's it, right? Like, you just
Yeah.
be as blunt like that, and they'll look at you, and chances are,
Yeah,
okay,
100%.
let's go. You know, it's just so sad, but it also serves a nice point, right? Because realizing that today's dating is largely done online, right?
Mhm.
And I'm gonna cut this short because this guy's video is probably got another 5 minutes to it, and there's a lot there.
If you guys want to check it out, we leave it in the description. Go check this video out.
But I'm gonna show you something here. It's something else that really stood out to me, right? It's a reference to Tinder, right, which is one of the leading dating apps.
Yeah.
Your generation in particular is something else, right?
Something else.
This is on Maze of Love, right? Tinder statistics in 2023. It's the latest users and swipe data.
Yeah.
Now, here's what really, really stuck out to me, right? Tinder has 71.1 million users worldwide, with over 50% being Gen Z.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Half of Tinder's user base is Gen Z, right? Now, okay, you remember when he said that a lot of people who are in the sub 5 just get dumped on by everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, now here's the question to you. Now, obviously you're a little bit young for this,
Yeah.
but with half of Tinder's user base being Gen Z, how do you think that's affected dating for you guys, for your generation? And again, I understand that, you being 15, you have limited window of understanding.
I mean, it's definitely put them in like a very specific range of the certain types of people who want to date. Because first off, yes, dating is mostly online, but people my age who do use Tinder are gonna match with people who are in very close in their age range, and or probably not the smartest people. First off, because they are young. Second off, because they are my generation. So yeah, as well as though my generation, they're very picky. They're gonna swipe left on anything that doesn't look appealing physically to them. They don't have to even read someone's bio or whatever. If they don't like what they see, they'll just swipe. So yeah, it's definitely gotta affect it in that way since it's mostly online as well.
Yeah. Well, okay, now that you brought that up, you said that most of your generation would swipe left.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's break that down. What's your gut instinct? What do you think is, the people who swipe left in the male group?
Mm-hmm.
What percentage of the matches they get do they swipe left on?
I would say like at a minimum, I would say like 45% they probably swipe left on.
All right, so that would mean that they swipe right on roughly 55%.
Yeah.
All right, what about women? What do you think women
I
do?
would put women to 65, 70. They swipe left.
So,
I would put, I'll be fair. I'll put 60% they swipe left.
so 60% left and 40% they swipe right.
Yeah.
Okay. So this does it gives more active more statistics on active users and stuff like that. But the one that really kind of hit me right between the eyes, which really just it was crazy. The median match rate for women on Tinder is 36%, and for men 1.8%.
Wow.
Okay, now let's put that even further into clarification.
Yeah.
Daily likes, that means swiping right. The percentage of men that swipe right every day is 53%. The percentage of females that swipe right every day is 5.
Wow. Wow. That's ridiculous.
Swipe lefts. The number of times that women swipe left is 95%.
Yeah. Jeez.
So out of all the pictures they see, they only swipe right 1 out of 20.
That's ridiculous.
And the daily passes for men is 47%.
I mean, yeah, that's ridiculous. With 70 million people being on Tinder, 50% of them being Gen Z, there is no way there's that many like people who are just like ugly or whatever that there's that many women swiping left.
Okay, but go back to what we talked about. Hypergamy. Okay, women will actively seek to date up for financial reasons and for
the looks.
sexual marketplace value.
Yeah.
Right? And like this video showed, the side effect of that has been that a lot of people are just not connecting.
Yeah.
You
crazy.
have the bottom tier women, which are resentful because the best they could do is middle tier guys. The middle tier women are resentful because while they can have sex with the top tier guys, they can't get relationships out of them.
Yeah.
And the top tier women are sitting pretty, so to speak, because they get the top tier guys, they get all the attention from all the guys.
Yeah.
So they can, basically take advantage of whoever they want.
Yeah, they just take advantage of that. They don't settle with anybody.
They even have new terms like foodie calls. In my generation, it was called a booty call. But no, apparently now it's a foodie call.
That's ridiculous.
So when you play a guy for no other reason other than to get him to take you out and spend money on you to buy you food, which is terrible. Like you're literally using somebody for money.
Yeah.
You don't like
and
him.
you cannot name that any other way. I mean, there's no other way to name that. You're literally using someone for money.
You don't like him. You have no intentions of dating him. You're not going to do anything for him. And you're just using him for food. Right? So that's disgusting. But, let's take this a little bit seriously too, right?
Yeah.
Not all the effects of feminism on Gen Z have had to do with dating.
Yeah.
Right? One of the more terrible,
concerning,
worrying effects of feminism on Gen Z is concerning intersectionality, right? And it's the body positivity movement.
Yeah.
Which, like every other stupid progressive idea, has just turned into something hideous and disgusting. And, in this case, I'm going to bring up another video, right? It's a kind of a TikTok compilation.
Yeah.
And this is what literally has become of the body positivity movement in 2023. So I'm going to go ahead and play that now. I'm going to mute it because there's music on this and there's, I don't know if there's copyrights on it or not. What I do know, though, is that I will be posting links to all of these videos, and the articles and stuff in the description for anybody who wants to follow up. This is genuinely concerning to me, right? Because I'm not a skinny guy.
Yeah.
I'm not under any delusions that I'm equivalent to Chris Hemsworth in physical attractiveness. That would be ludicrous for me to say that. And that's the other thing that makes this body positivity thing even more disgusting to me, is that it's one way. It only applies to women, right? Because women still judge men incredibly harshly on their bodies, yet have the audacity to look the way they do while they're doing it. Now, this is an example, and to me, this is just, oh, 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 all right, well, I just got to play the video. Here it goes. Again, I'm going to talk over it because there's no audio, right? But for people listening on a podcast, there's a young lady. Well, let's just say she was well fed. And now there's another young lady who's wearing what I think is supposed to be a bikini, but there's a lot of fabric there, and there's just a lot there. There's a lot.
I will say
there.
for this one, for those of you viewers listening and not watching, you should be thankful for that fact.
Now, I personally, again, I don't see anything wrong with the idea of teaching people that, they shouldn't be ashamed of themselves to the point where they're dysfunctional, right? Like that's an absolutely reasonable thing to say and to teach. Now, when that goes way past being ashamed of yourself, into being not only proud of yourself, but that you're so far off the deep end that you're deluding yourself into thinking that you're healthy, when I could hear your arteries clogging from here. Like, it's insane. It's just insane.
Yeah, and it's also really bad, I feel like back in the day, something that got people from starting, not caring about their health when they started getting fat was the humility in that. They wouldn't take pride in something like that. It would get them to want to work out, want to go to the gym, want to exercise. And when you completely get rid of the humiliation and make it a good thing, that's just you shoot yourself in the foot.
No, and the worst part is, right, is that almost all of these females that are in this video are young.
Yeah.
Right? They're in a position in their life where if they made the effort, they could transform themselves. And yeah, hey, if you're proud of who you are, that's wonderful. That's fantastic. But if you're 20 and you literally weigh 400 pounds as a female, you're never going to see 70.
Yeah.
Ever. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. You also can't expect, results in a relationship to be at the maximum.
Oh my God, there's so much pink.
It's disgusting.
It's just look, and I'm not laughing at the individual people, right? It's the ideology that forces this kind of mental illness into someone thinking something that just doesn't exist in reality.
Yeah.
And to make it even worse is that some of these young women, they actually have quite attractive faces in certain positions and at certain angles.
Yeah.
And then when you look at them from a different angle, then it's almost like you're being fooled by an Instagram filter.
Yeah.
And it's like, ugh, that's the same person? Like, how's that possible?
Yeah, and if you call them out on this behavior nowadays, you get called fat phobic.
Yeah. And again, as a person who is not skinny,
yeah,
I can speak to this from personal experience that being large is not something that should ever be accepted as normal. It should never be promoted as healthy, because it just isn't. Any doctor that goes along with that should have their medical license revoked.
Yeah.
Because doctors can tell you the clear, direct, and well documented historical evidence
Yeah.
between morbid obesity and death via many different factors is well established.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say with that is this is what happens when these people have encouraged, I guess, feminism to the extent that it's gone to. You have these women having themselves turn out like this. They're doing this to themselves. It's not like they were born like this, and they're becoming morbidly obese at the age of like 25, and they're being encouraged. They're being called beautiful, and they're being they're making this like it's okay and like it's a good thing, and they should express themselves when it is the complete opposite, and it is also detrimental to their health. And it's a very, very bad thing.
And I just want to, again, I want to reiterate, I'm not against, in any way, shape, or form, people developing a positive, healthy self-image.
Yeah.
It's when that self-image crosses into delusion
Mm-hmm.
that you have a problem.
Yeah, because they're ignoring the effects that it's taking on their health.
And it's similar to the way that feminists have ignored the effects of their ideology on society.
Yeah.
Now you have feminists going on TikTok and recording all these videos hating on passport bros because you got a bunch of men who have basically told women, you've told us for about a decade or so that you don't need us, that you don't want us, that we're all crap, and that's it. We're not even trying with you anymore. We're finding love elsewhere.
Yeah.
And then they hate that. And when you look at all of the things that feminism has fought for, it's transitioned over the years. First what's referred to as first wave and second wave feminism was really about equality.
Mm-hmm.
But third wave, beginning with third wave feminism and fourth wave feminism, it's transferred into or transmuted into just basically hating men.
Yeah.
And it isn't about seeking equal status with men.
Mm-hmm.
It's seeking special benefits for women.
Yeah, and we've seen that from the TikTok hashtag. I think it was called Cam, which literally stood for kill all men, and we literally see it happening.
Well, that's why you have to be careful about whatever ideas you allow into your mind, because what's in there, it can help you,
Mm-hmm.
it can guide you, but at the same time, it can twist you, and it can lure you down a path that will have you end up somewhere that you never thought you would be, and that's something that as a father, I want to do everything within my power to help you look at the world with open eyes, to be skeptical of everything that you can be, and to make judgments based on not what you're being fed, but off of your own understanding. At the same time, I've also cautioned you
Mm-hmm.
on who you should put trust in and why, right? Because the voices that you put trust in can impact the way that you see the world. They can impact the way that you understand the world, the way the events that happen on a daily occasion can be interpreted, right? So I've even told you to question some of the things that I've said to you. I've told you to go look for your own information, go verify that what I'm saying is actually the truth.
Yeah.
Because that's what you need to do.
Yeah.
You need to do that. Every single person should do that. And if people did that, I think the world would be a much better place, because we would have a minimization of ideology, and we would have a growth of ideas.
Yeah.
Right? Ideology is basically the marriage of ideas and religion. Right? That's pretty much what ideology is.
Yeah.
Ideas, on the other hand, are something that all people can agree on if they make sense. But the problem is that when you invest an idea with religious belief, then you can't go contrary to that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're going contrary to your religious beliefs, then you're a blasphemer. Like you're turning your back on whatever deity you worship.
Yeah.
this topic has been something that I think we could probably go on for 3, 4, 5 hours.
Yeah.
The video's running a little long, so I want to cut it short, but I do want to reemphasize what we tried to say here is that feminism initially started out as the idea of women just simply seeking equal rights to men, and that was back in the 30s, the 20s, the early 1900s.
Yeah.
Right, that's transitioned over time.
I would say in the beginning it was a very fair movement. It's not like they should have been treated less than.
Well, no, that's a different view. I mean, there were areas where women were treated less than, and there were areas where they weren't.
Yeah.
Again, everything is not constant. There are plenty of women that have historical roles where they've developed companies and they've been responsible for some of the biggest inventions. That information is available out there. That wasn't part of the scope of this conversation.
Yeah.
Because it shouldn't be necessary to have to bring that up because it should be obvious.
Yeah.
But for some people it isn't. But in any case, what we should understand is that we are living in a world today where feminism, much like every other progressive idea, has been twisted and corrupted from within its own ranks to be something far beyond what it was initially created to be. To go from equal opportunity to equity, and to go from, people being treated fairly to gender preference, where people have to be discriminated against. In fact, I think it was Best Buy that just came out in the news that they have a training program for managers that white people are prohibited from participating in. Best Buy Corporation, this place you buy TVs and like, come on, that's just ridiculous. But that's what happens when you mix religion with ideas. People go to the extreme. So, I want to thank everybody for joining us for this conversation. If you're still here with us, thank you. It's been a long haul.
Yeah.
But I hope that you found the conversation stimulating, and that you've possibly even heard something you didn't know before. And again, all of the links for everything that we've used as substance for this conversation will be in the description. And I genuinely appreciate the opportunity to share these conversations, not just with you, but also with my son. Because, at the end of the day, everything I do is for my family. I'm not a perfect man, and I've certainly made mistakes, just like every other human being. But what we have to do here is the best that we can. And this is one step towards helping other people perhaps find ways to bridge conversations with their children about subjects that aren't necessarily all that comfortable.
Yep.
But it's important, right? If you want to pass on your ideas, if you want to pass on your morals and your beliefs to your children, you have to find a way to talk about it. So hopefully either this video can start a conversation, directly, or it could be the inspiration for a conversation later to come. In any case, my name is Anthony.
My name is Jeremiah.
And thank you for joining us for this episode. Thank you.